Woods, where there's a story in every bottle.
Here we are again.
Here we are again. This is the second show of 2024.
Is it?
Cheers.
Cheers.
I don't know if I can reach all the way across. We'll
just
cheers.
we can do it. There we go.
Cheers. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for yet another proudly contrarian Monday Night Live here at Hermit Woods. We have a couple special guests joining us today, but before we get into that, I just want to go through our little preamble. For all of you who are joining us for the very first time, thank you and welcome. And if you like the broadcast today, we'd love it if you'd like it and share it with your friends and family if you think they would appreciate the conversation as well. And if you are joining us, also let us know. If you make a comment on YouTube or on Facebook, I will see those comments and we'll know you're here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions, and we will do our best to answer them online and or on air. And if we can't get to them during the show, we'll get to the questions as soon after the show as possible. And if you're new to this program also, we'd love it if you'd consider subscribing to our page. You can subscribe to our YouTube page right underneath Ken, and you can subscribe to the Facebook page with a little bell in the corner of your screen.
I've done that before.
Yeah. So that's, I think I've covered it. Again, thank you everybody for joining us yet again for another Monday. It's always a lot of fun for us, and especially today we have two great guests with us, Diane and Chuck Souther. They are the co-founders and owners of Apple Hill Farm in Concord. It's a place where we have been working with and receiving apples from for, what, 10 years now?
At least.
Probably, yeah.
10
At
years?
least,
Yeah.
not more.
And not just apples. Apples, other fruit, I believe, at times.
Yep.
And you folks have also carried our wines at your farm store in the summer. And we had some fun out on your orchard taking some of the photos for our new website.
I've enjoyed a bunch of those pictures.
We have too. We have quite a collection of that. Yes,
Yeah.
you probably haven't seen them all.
So. I didn't even know. I don't even remember being there. It's like, oh my goodness.
You'll see them all eventually, because I'll tag you if I post a
keep doing it?
picture
Okay,
of you.
good.
You'll get
Yeah.
tagged. And if you would like copies of those pictures, just let me know. I'll be happy to send you whatever you like. So,
Good.
I thought we would start. If you read about what the show is about today, you already know a little bit about Chuck and Diane, and so I was so intrigued by that wonderful story that I thought it would be great to have them share it with us live, and maybe fill in some of the parts we didn't talk about in that short bio. So let's go back to high school. You grew up and went to school together in Concord?
That is correct. Yep, we met in junior high school.
Excellent.
Actually.
Junior high.
Junior high, yeah, tell me about it.
Were you an item in junior high?
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Wow,
You
that's
don't know
fantastic.
it then,
Yeah, well.
but obviously that was it. I mean, yeah, that girl in the short skirt and brown hair just did it for me.
You didn't know why then.
No,
but
you don't know
You
why.
figured all that out later.
Yeah. There's so much stuff going on when you're that age, but obviously there's like, bingo, that's
So
the one.
when you were young, just to get some background, your parents, what were your parents doing while you were growing up? What
Well,
were
I
they involved?
kind of grew up in the country.
Okay.
It was a rural farm. My father was a railroad engineer.
Ah,
So he worked a lot, but he also was at home a lot. So he was back and forth. We had a few Scottish Highlands that we raised at the time, and they were pretty, new to the area. And we had chickens, and we made our hay, and we always had big gardens and canned and all that, but we were in the rural area. Chuck, on the other hand-
Was that a big family? Were you
No,
one of many
no,
siblings?
I had one older brother that was 12 years older than I was.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So you had to put in help out.
Well,
Everybody
a little
was
bit.
helping
I
out a
mean,
bit?
you know, it was a hobby farm. It wasn't a big farm.
Okay.
You know, we had, you know, one horse and one pony and a couple of sheep and, you know, 2 cows at a time, and that was about it. But, you know, we raised what we did, and it went in the freezer, and we canned a lot of things and had a big garden. So, yeah, I was involved in picking and harvesting and all
Right.
that.
She drove a tractor.
That was
is
a
the
winning
Before-
point right
before she
there.
had a
You ain't
driver's
kidding.
license, probably,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, her father taught her how to drive a tractor.
Perfect.
Well, with my brother being 12 years older, when I was old enough, he was off in the service.
Yeah.
So I was back at home, so I got to drive the old John Deere.
Yeah.
Helped out pulling logs out and doing all of that kind of good thing. So I learned right up front how to do it and drive a standard and,
Great.
yep.
And Chuck, you were your family's in the grocery
My
business?
family was in the grocery business, started in Bristol and moved to Concord. And both my father and my grandfather ran Southers Market in Concord for a number of years. Highly successful, but when there were no convenience stores in Concord at that point. You know, it was grocery stores like my family's. And we were in the part of town that there were a lot of doctors and lawyers and all of that, and we delivered right to the home. People would call up in the morning, you know, I need a gallon of milk and an orange juice and a bird's eye this and blah, 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 in a bag, and
Off
in
it
the
goes.
afternoon, we'd go out and
Was that
deliver them.
common at the stores delivered, or is that something special to your shop in
That
the
was
area?
pretty special at the time, I think.
Yeah, I don't think many people were doing that.
Yeah.
And, you know, custom cut, meat counter, you know, all that. Yeah, when it all started to change, Dad said, you know, I have 2 brothers, you know, okay, who's gonna step up here? And being slightly rebellious, all 3 of us said, no, we're not gonna do that.
Did you work in the store as a kid?
Oh, yeah, all of us did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just started out with sweeping at the end of the day to, we were all assigned a certain product to stock. Mine was potato and cot beverages, potatoes and cot beverages, and then sweep the floors.
So, just as an aside, my grandfather grew up in AMP. He was at the point in which stores transitioned from the store clerk would collect your goods for you
Yep.
to self-serve.
Yep.
He was
Yeah,
in the
that's right.
industry
Huh.
when that transition was taking place, and spent the rest of his next 50 years working for AMP, growing up within that
Huh.
company. So it's
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, so anyhow, so we were gonna do something else in high school. We both started working on area farms. And when it came time to graduate, you do the whole guidance counselor thing, and we were like, we wanna go to a school that's gonna teach us about farming.
So you were both working at a farm together?
Yep.
Were you already going out, seeing each
Yeah,
other?
oh, yeah.
Okay.
And
They were
the
going out
guidance
in
counselor didn't
junior
know what to
high.
do with us at that point. They did, you know, what are you talking about? You know, Concord at that time, all the Bow students were in there. I think our graduating class in high school was, what, 475 kids? I mean, it's just a lot of kids. We were the only 2 that asked that particular question.
But we had taken college prep classes.
Yeah.
So we, you know, we had the grades and the ability to do that.
Sure.
So, went to UNH. At that point, the Thompson School, T-School as we called it, was a 2-year program. They had an agricultural program.
And I went into the 4-year program.
And after a year, we kind of said, you know, all this education stuff, we want to go start a
You
farm.
want to do it.
We want to do it.
You want to do it, not
Yeah,
learn
so,
about it. You
yep.
want to do it.
We
Yeah.
came home after 1 year, got married, and started looking right away for a piece of land.
Wow.
So
And,
we graduated in 74, we got married in 76.
Graduated from high school,
Yep.
Yeah,
74, married in 76.
yeah, and then bought the property in 78. So it was pretty
Wow.
fast moving.
So within 4 years.
Yeah.
So at about the time that most people would still be going to school, going to college, learning, you guys were off figuring out how to-
Trying.
Well, and
Just
at
to
the
make it
time,
happen.
at the time, it was important to us because land property values were changing in that bit of a time. What used to be farmland now became very you know, you wanted to develop it.
So
and put
this
houses in.
was the beginnings of sort of the suburban growth around Concord. So
You better believe it.
people's old 200-acre piece would be purchased and then put in 20 homes or 30 homes or whatever it was, and the farm would go away. And so you wanted to grab that land before the prices got crazy,
Well, we could,
right?
yeah, we
I
could
mean,
sort of see that happening.
you could see it happen.
And we weren't necessarily settled on Concord, but we wanted to stay close to home. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
And we got somewhat lucky in that the first parcel that we found, it was abandoned. You know, was farmland, but hadn't been farmed for years. And it had been bought by a couple in Massachusetts, and they were gonna come to New Hampshire and farm.
Mm-hmm.
And the husband became ill, and so that never materialized.
Okay.
And when we showed up, there was obviously other people interested in the property, and she made the decision against her realtor's advice to sell it to this young couple.
Because the realtors and the
Oh,
other
yeah,
people
commission.
it was about money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
commission.
And not
so-
as much as it is nowadays,
So
but it
you-
was beginning to.
So you guys found someone who
We
had sort of
got lumped into it.
a romantic idea that here's a young couple that want to farm the land.
Yep.
Yep.
We want to sell it to them. Even if we don't make as much money selling it,
Yep.
we're going to move it forward.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was an opportunity, but yeah, as I said, it was abandoned. There was nothing there.
And is that part of Apple Hill Farm?
Yep. Yes,
It
it
is.
is. Yes, it is.
The original parcel
Yep,
that
the
you
original, yeah,
bought?
the first thing we had to do was cut that driveway in. And the first year, we built a kind of a shed, kind of affair, just to put stuff in.
Okay.
And,
So
So
you're
there was no-
living elsewhere?
yep.
There was no house on the property, no barn, just land.
Yep.
How many acres?
That initial parcel was what, 150 or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. You're what, 22 years old, you buy 150
Well,
acres of
and we were
land.
very lucky because within the community that we'd been working with, they knew our worth ethic. So when we went to Farm Credit to ask for some lending, they were behind us. So, you know, it was a big gamble.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, sure it was.
And the
Yeah,
first,
if you take on a big mortgage, you know, or at
it
least
was
a big.
big at that time for
Yeah,
us,
big,
certainly,
and,
yeah. We
you
were
know,
like,
because you hadn't
you know, yeah, I
not much
think our
to
parents thought pretty much we were crazy, but,
Yeah, when we signed all the papers, it was a 25-year loan. So we were in the year 2000 something. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, 1978, that was like, wow,
Yeah.
2000 something.
Did your parents help you out with it?
oh, yeah.
Good.
Yep.
So they supported it.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, they did, yeah, and, yeah, they actually helped out a lot of the physical stuff.
Cutting
The
wood,
first year, yeah, the
playing in
driveway
the
getting
mud.
cut in, playing in the mud. And then we started logging that first year to get the lumber to build the house the next year.
Oh, wow, so
How
the,
did you
the,
figure out what kind of farm you were going to?
Well, we'd been working on
between-
apple orchards, so
Okay.
it was gonna be an apple orchard.
Okay,
we-
so you,
that was our
you
deal.
both enjoyed working
Yep.
on other apple orchards
Yep.
and the whole process of growing apples.
Yep, so
Okay.
that first year, the very next spring, was when the first apple trees went in the ground.
Okay, so
And of
there
course-
were no apples on the ground
there was no
except
apples. Nope.
a couple wild things or
Yep.
something, but.
And at that point, the apple market was good, and there were tons of orchards around. You wandered around, you've seen them, they're all abandoned now, most of them. But there was a market for that stuff, and Macintosh, we were Macintosh country. You know, that was how it was sold,
Yeah,
it was mostly wholesale.
wholesale.
And your apples were going to supermarkets, or they were going to jams and jellies, or
The
what
apples,
did
the
you-
apples were mostly going to brokers.
Okay,
They were third party, and I mean, at that point, through the early 80s, there would be brokers show up on your farm in July, and we'd like to handle your apples. Here's the deal. You pick them, we'll send our truck up, or we'll store them, we'll pack them, and there was a lot of options.
did you have any idea at all where your apples were going, where they ended up on the shelf? Or
We
what?
had an idea depending on which broker
Broker.
they went to,
Yep.
but no, we had no control.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of it, interestingly, was all on a handshake deal. And we were small, there were bigger orchards that doing the same thing, you know, just handshake, yeah.
and,
Well,
and
that's
how, do
when
you
we
know,
start picking.
how do you know what a fair deal is, too, right? I mean, was there
It paid the bills.
was there an apple?
It paid the bills.
Was it, well, okay, so it's fair enough that you would end up putting food on the table and pay the bills.
Yes.
So that was good.
Yes.
But relative to everybody else, you know, were you getting ripped off? Were you getting half what
You
you
know-
could get? You know, was there like a co-op or a group of people in New Hampshire that were growing apples, and did you talk to one another?
Oh, yeah, that's been one of the cool things about apple growers, is we've always just
It
gotten along.
seems like a whole community.
So-
Yeah, it's a whole community.
This is an interesting point, because when Joe Rolfe was putting in his new
Yeah.
orchard up the road from you,
Yeah.
10, 20 miles, we went to him and were hopeful, since he was planting all these new trees, that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
he might consider putting in some crabapple trees, because we've been sort of desperate to try and
Yeah.
find crabapples. They're not easy to find. And literally, on a handshake, he agreed to put in 75 trees. And, you know, he didn't know from
At
us,
his
from
expense.
Adam.
Yeah, didn't know
And
if we'd be around, if we'd
We
wanna
could
buy
have
them.
said we were going to buy all his apples and then been out of business the next year, and who knew? But he
Yeah.
took a gamble and planted some trees he didn't know much about.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
been a good gamble so far. We've bought every apple
Yep.
he's grown.
Yeah, Joe's doing a good job over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I mean, that's always been kind of the apple grower thing.
Yeah.
And the further we get into our career, we've realized that. I mean, we used to get together and go skiing, all the apple growers did. In part because it was a different deal then, because you pick the apples, put them on a truck, they went down the driveway. And a few guys would have packing houses in Londonderry.
Ah.
But yeah, the apples went on a truck down the driveway, in the winter you had to prune and ski. You know, what a sweet deal.
Now, was part of the interest of growing apples to coordinate your love of skiing? Was that in the question there, that it's not something that you're doing year round?
It was
So-
the
so much,
definite
or-
mix, yes.
Okay.
And we knew enough friends, like dairy farmers. They're the hardest working people in the world, I swear,
It seems like it.
honest to God. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. We wanted a cyclical sort of business. And we tell this to other people all the time. Our first loan at Farm Credit, of course, there's a lot of paperwork and all that, and they wanted a business plan. Well, we were really scrounging at that point to figure out a business plan, and one of the things we put in there, and we will ski one more day every year than we did the year before. And they thought it was great.
Well, it's a sign of success, right?
Well, I guess so.
You could
That's a
ski
measure.
one more day a year.
Yeah, every
I
year,
like
one more
that.
day.
Bob, we
let's
need
put
to
that in
start
our new
skiing
business
one
plan.
more day a year.
Every year.
That's in our business plan.
So,
That's
I mean, it was good. I
great.
mean, I won't deny, it was difficult. Of course, it takes a number of years to get apple trees into production, and we continued to work off the farm wherever we could, you know, for other farms, other businesses.
So you're making
How
So-
many years,
That's right.
yeah, that's a good question. How many years from when you bought the land to when you got your first revenue from it?
First revenue crop must have been about 84 or 5.
So 6
thinking.
years?
Yeah.
That's a lot of commitment.
That's 6 years.
Yeah.
6 years of paying a mortgage without
Yep.
making money off the land.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a vineyard.
Yeah,
The
yeah, it's the
same
same thing,
sort of
it's a
thing.
long-term
Yeah.
commitment. We're working on that now to try to get that time frame lower, you know, get production quicker.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the deal. And then in 1990, it all changed.
So yeah, tell them, I know,
But
in my
just one
speaking
more before you go.
with Steve Wood, things did change in that wholesale Macintosh world. That,
Yep.
you know, you guys had a good run for 10, 15 years, or whatever it was, and then things changed.
Well, before we get
Yeah.
to that,
Yeah, okay.
two things. Pearson Souther
Yep,
says
my
hello.
nephew.
He's
Hey,
nephew.
Pearson. He's right around the corner,
Oh,
actually.
good. And before you go there, I also want to, we didn't even talk about what we're drinking. So
Yeah,
what
that's
are we
right.
drinking?
Let's go
Well,
for it.
this is Kittens, our heirloom hard cider that we make here at Hermit Woods, and the cider that we get is crafted at Apple Hill Farm. And these are heirloom cider apples that were not planted in 1976
No, they weren't.
or 80 or 84 even. It was the next chapter, right? And when we were first enjoying making wine and cider from what was growing around our yards and our friends' yards, we were just picking apples and learning about apples. We didn't know anything about them. And then we started reading and understanding that there are thousands of apples. They go back centuries, and French and British have focused on various types and balancing different aspects of certain
Yep.
types of ciders. And then people like you and Steve over at Farnham Hill have focused on that and created things like that and planted apples. Some of your apples are that way. So that worked out great to hook up and to be able to get a fine crafted blend of cider from you that we then modify a little bit here by adding extra apples and crab apples and pears and whatever else is going on. But it's, you know, it's like Steve extra dry type of format where you take a blend and try to come up with a cider that sort of speaks to some of those old world traditional ciders in character.
I have to say, in our farm stand, it's one of the popular sellers.
Yeah, it is a very popular,
Yep.
and it's been going up each year. We buy a little bit more cider and make a little bit more, and we've introduced it to Hannaford's, and they sell quite a bit of this, the supermarkets. And tomorrow, Maya and I go down to meet with Market Basket, and I'll be bringing a bottle of this and sharing that with them as well.
Yeah, good,
So that may expand
Great.
good.
as well.
Glad to hear it.
So that was a good break to talk about the transition that you were
Yeah,
about to
there you
get
go.
into.
So, in the late 1980s and right around 1990, we had been out west to Washington State on a couple of horticultural trips.
I
Yeah.
thought you were going to
Combined
say
with
skiing.
skiing.
I thought you were going to say
Combined.
skiing.
One of them was.
Okay.
Yeah, one of them we did go back out, we skied at Whistler.
Vancouver,
that
yeah, I
was
was going to
great.
say.
I still
yeah.
haven't skied there. My son has skied there, but I haven't been there yet.
And anyhow, and it was amazing, because literally like driving from here to Concord, nothing but orchards. So, I mean, you saw a lot of stuff. But if you stopped in a rest area, instead of picking up a brochure to go to Santa's Village or the Hobo Railroad, there would be brochures on invest in Buena Vista Orchards, a new 6,000 acre high density orchard, and here are the tax write-offs you could get on it. And we're like,
What?
It was tax at that point, investing in farm, agriculture. And you're like, huh, how about that? And
You weren't thinking of moving to Washington, were you?
no, we weren't, but it was, that's kind of weird, imagine that. And then about 1990, a whole bunch of those apples, those acres, suddenly started producing apples. And that's when Washington State became the 500-pound gorilla. Your apple on that computer is a red delicious apple, because that was the apple. That was that apple was that sort of conical thing with the bumps on the bottom.
And Steve Jobs had time in Washington.
I don't know why he
He
picked
did.
Macintosh, but he chose a red delicious apple to sort of be
Well,
his logo.
he spent time in Washington State before he created this, when he was just in
Yeah.
college or whatever.
Yeah.
so.
And so that was part of it. And then, of course, at that time, there was a consolidation of the stores. And Western New York was planting a bunch of apples too. And suddenly, we found out that there are a lot of pretty good apples on the market other than Macintosh. And I can remember the fruit growers in New Hampshire actually got caused to occur a survey of who buys Macintosh apples. And the average age was like, it was over 60. And a bunch of us like,
Oh.
that's probably not good. For us in the
So
Macintosh business.
was New England only the area for Macintosh, or
Yeah,
principally the area
Principally,
for Macintosh?
Yeah, we used to joke that New York, Hudson Valley used to try to go Macintosh, but they couldn't.
But they-
And part of it was climate,
Okay,
cool falls,
yeah.
frosty nights, sunny, bright days. all that.
Crappy,
I just
stony.
really liked the Macintosh apples. And the best Macintosh apples were, you'd sell apples by the size. Were like what we call 120 size, 120 max in a box. That's a good, if you think about a Macintosh apple, what it wants to do, that's it.
How big is that?
It's
That's,
two and 3/4 inch.
Small.
Smaller than a tennis ball,
Smaller than what
a
you
Smaller
little
than
bit,
a tennis ball,
a little
okay.
bit bigger than a tangerine. So
And-
you think about the apples at the store now,
they're
3 times that size.
massive, weird
Massive.
things.
And the
yeah.
stores, they just did what was natural, the mother's
Bigger
gonna
is
come in and
better.
buy 6 apples by the pound. 6 of them that big is so much, 6 of them that big is
More money.
More money. So stores started demanding 96
Bigger
count,
apples.
80 count. And, we tried for quite a few years to try to figure out how to grow to that market.
Ah,
And then,
okay.
they started waxing them up like brand new cars. And so that meant all the hand pack lines went away. Everybody had to have a machine that would put the wax on. And the straw that broke the camel's back for really New England was then the store said, and we want a sticker on them. And that was a whole nother machine. whole nother
That's right.
cost.
So
Those
every
stupid little
apple had to
stickers.
have
The
a
Those
stupid
sticker.
little stickers. Yep.
That killed
And
New England Macintosh.
That was, at that point, you know, we weren't doing good, the industry was struggling, real estate prices were high, so it was pretty easy to say, well, I'm not making any money on that block of trees and turn it into houses.
Yeah.
But you're eating your
then
equity
you cash
that
out,
way.
you make,
Yeah.
you just make a bunch of
And,
homes, make a lot of money.
Yeah, Steve and I had always talked, we're roughly the same age, and we were really lamenting this, like, what are we gonna do? You know, we can't keep doing this, because every year the income was dropping, and the brokers were going out of business, so you had fewer places for those apples to go.
And changing crop. It's what, 6 years, 5-6 years to turn
Yeah,
around a
it was,
crop.
yeah, and we were kind of left with, so what what do we grow? And that was a tough thing. And
So that
Steve,
was the big pivot point.
that was the pivot
That was the
point.
big pivot
And
And
Steve,
what year is this about?
it would have been
Late
92, 3,
80s?
4.
92, beginning of the 90s, okay.
Yep.
That's when I moved to New Hampshire.
Maybe
94.
it's your fault.
I hope not.
But, so anyhow, yeah, our collaboration with Steve was a lot of phone calls and just
No,
talking about,
You met Steve,
well, through the apple
independent
growers.
through the apple
Yeah, we were
growing
all
thing.
apple growers,
Okay.
yeah.
okay.
And Steve, bless his heart, I think the statute of limitations is over anyhow. He went to England to sort of search out this cider thing and actually filled his pockets full of cyan wood, which you can graft. They look like pencils. He filled his pockets full of those things and came home, probably totally illegal.
That's great.
And made a bunch of contacts over there and came back and we talked about it and that was part of I think we can do this. We gotta find the varieties that like it here in New England.
Right.
Well, and then there were flavors that he liked.
Yeah,
because he
Steve
knew the
had certain-
ciders. He had certain tastes that
Yeah,
he was
if you
going
had his
for.
ciders, he's dry.
Yeah,
Steve likes them
Yeah.
completely extra dry.
yeah,
But they were unique. Nobody else was growing them.
right.
So that was like appealing from a business
Well, there
point of
was
view.
no hard cider business really in
Oh,
the
God, no.
US.
Oh,
You,
no.
you know what we call him.
Yeah.
too. He's the godfather of cider.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've been calling him that
Yeah.
for some time now.
he really is. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that whole pivot to do that, it's uncharted territory. I mean, here you did it once before, 15, 20 years previously, you decided to put a bunch of apple trees in the ground and grow Macintosh, and that worked for a while. And then here you are thinking, okay, now we gotta start again.
Yeah.
Well,
with
let's take
what?
these pencils that we brought back from England and put these in the ground because they grow these funky weird apples that no one knows
And wait,
about.
and wait to see how they
And
did.
wait to see if you could actually sell that product.
And it wasn't just us he was sharing this with.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
as time went on a little bit, and that ski group that we got together with, that was skiers from all over New England and New York, he shared with them. So it just kind of morphed out from there.
Yeah.
So now, a lot of them are all doing their own ciders too.
Yeah.
So long story short, you had to think about cutting down trees or buying more land, or
We,
how did you fit this in?
Okay, so on Apple Hill Farm, we had another field that wasn't in apple trees at that point. So we said, well, let's dedicate that whole block to cider.
We used to make hay and sell hay.
Okay, yeah.
Well, we realized we weren't making a whole lot of money off hay, and it was a whole lot of work and a whole lot of angst, because you'd have it all ready and it would rain, and people wouldn't show up for it, and so.
It's a crazy
It
way
was
to
a
make money.
hayfield that turned into an orchard. It's like
So
perfect.
it turned into an orchard, and we took it, it's 7 acres, and about half of it is these hard cider varieties, and the other half is apples that that I thought was, okay, I'm gonna cover my bets a little bit. So Golden Russet, Golden Delicious, there was a lot of Esopus Spitzenberg out there. And I figured, okay, there's dual, we can either sell those fresh or put them in cider, they're all good cider apples.
And is this around the same time you transitioned to pick your own, or?
Yeah, I was going there, so 94.
So that's the next, yeah, because that's the other thing where there's that value
That's the
added.
hedge.
Because you can't wholesale your markets wholesale your apples like you were before.
Yeah.
Because they weren't big enough and you couldn't compete with the mega growers. So now you've got to look to how do you get value added? Well, you could ferment it and turn it into an alcoholic beverage and sell it for more money than the individual apples.
Which is
Or
the
you
tack
could
that Steve
have
took.
people come and pick apples
And
on your property and start a farm stand, and that's.
We spent a lot of time in 94 in the winter visiting a whole bunch of other farms. And part of that ski group was a couple of orchards in New Jersey. Well, they kind of went through the whole population boom before we did.
Yeah,
And so we
okay.
went down there and they were like, you know, pick your own, pick your own, pick your own. I remember one of them telling me, your most valuable piece of property in your farm is your parking lot. Make sure it's dry, because people don't like getting their cars in the mud. And I remember thinking, God.
Well, and they were right out of, you know, New York City, so they
Yeah,
were
yeah.
Yeah,
very
they were
close.
right across. Interesting story there, but anyhow. So yeah, that was when we built the first part of the farm stand. We've added on 3 times since. And we said, we gotta diversify our crop base.
Yeah.
So we started growing small fruit. We started with strawberries, planted blueberries, takes a couple of years to get
I
blueberries
pick
in.
black currants at your place.
Yeah, we still have some black
Do
currants.
you? Yeah, yeah. I picked black currants. I didn't know anything about them, but they
Yeah.
sounded like an interesting fruit to make wine out of. And
Did-
that was 2011, I think, was when,
Oh, might have
2011
been.
or 2010.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the
Yeah.
connection.
So you made a decision you were leaning into cider apples to sell wholesale, and then you were opening up the farm stand and doing pick your own. And Poverty Lane, did they make they said, we're gonna go into
Steve said, we're gonna be cider.
because he didn't want people
It
coming
was-
in
it was
to
just
pick
a
their
different,
own, or
just a
just a
different deal.
different-
Yeah.
And plus, he didn't have Diane. This girl can sell anything, I swear.
I used to have it all figured out, I don't anymore. You have to remember too, we were gonna make our own hard cider at the time too. We actually went and got a name, we have a trade name that's different than Apple Hill Farm, and we were gonna produce hard cider at the farm. But then as we got into it, I wouldn't be able to sell your wine if we produced hard cider there, because the liquor laws. the
Couldn't
way
hold
they
2
were.
licenses,
Oh.
a producer
And
Right,
and a
right.
regular
so-
wine license.
3-tier.
Couldn't back then.
You couldn't.
It was
You can't
either
now.
all in or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was one or the other.
You can't now.
Yeah, I don't think you can now.
It's the
You're one
3-tier
or the other.
problem.
Yep. It's back in the 50s. It's like, you know, the old, you know, bootleggers. So anyhow, so we have another name,
yeah.
Peckerville Cider Works, which we still have the trade name for, that we use on a few things, but it's still there. So maybe someday, who knows?
So it's interesting because when we first started Hermit Woods, written into our business plan was this concept that we saw an opportunity. There were so many orchards trying to figure out what to do
Oh,
with
I
their
remember
apples.
Yeah.
And we thought, what if we built sort of a kit that came with some expertise, and you could come
trailer.
to us and you could
Module thing.
buy into this idea that we could help you become a producer of hard cider and turn your crop into a more valuable crop. We figured an apple off the tree is 10 times more valuable in a bottle of alcohol than it is off the tree. So it never flew. It partly didn't fly. The first orchard we were working a little bit with in Alexandria,
Yeah, Cardigan Mountain.
Cardigan
Yeah.
Mountain,
Oh,
and
yeah.
his sons were actually making cider, and so they knew a little bit about it. And we kind of floated the concept with them, and they just didn't have any interest at all in
Well,
pursuing
no, I
it.
think
and-
they may have looked and it was not allowed.
No, it was allowed. What Chuck is saying is not allowed is they can't bring in other companies' products to sell.
Oh, right, at the same time.
So you can sell, they could be
You
an
can do your
orchard
own.
and
You can do your
manufacture and
own and
sell
do it,
your
yeah.
own,
But-
yeah, so.
But once you get into the minutia of getting the permits and working through it and working with
Yeah.
the state, it was, I don't have to.
It
Oh,
was gonna
yeah.
interfere with our skiing.
Well,
Babysitting these vats of cider.
That's an important.
Yeah, I
element,
get
So-
it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, and we found a ready market for the apples.
Right.
Through Steve, and we work now with Steve and Ricker Hill Orchards up in Maine.
Oh, great.
And they've planted quite a few acres and grafted a bunch over too. So we feel like we've got this sort of steady volume of production until this year, that we can meet a bunch of markets and sell. We've had really good luck selling the apples at a decent price, and built up a sort of a little bit of reputation of, I know Joe, we've had some discussions about this, is we let them fall on the ground. Steve and I talk almost every day about these fruit and when they are perfect. The problem with it, they have reached full maturity, full flavor, all the sugar's in there, all the other goodies are all in there, but getting them off the ground is labor intensive. And it's really short, we figured this out too, so with some disaster, limit to how long you can
They
keep
can't
those
be on
apples.
the ground very
They
long.
can't be on the ground long, they gotta be turned into juice pretty quick too.
Yeah.
But we've sort of got that reputation of being willing to do that. So that's it. But yeah, back to the thing, built farm stand, started planting small fruit, and when we were working for another orchard all those years ago, we were involved in starting the Concord Farmers Market.
Oh.
And so we said, well, let's go back there. We're trying to build this retail thing out on the outer skirts of Concord. You know, and you've been in, we got that long driveway. It's hard to really see the farm from the road.
Mhm.
You know, we need a little bit of help getting people out here. So we started going to the market, and then it didn't take too long to realize that if we're gonna send a truck to the market with just strawberries on it, why don't we grow peas? And we can put them on the market. And then that quickly exploded into all the
Beans
other,
and cucumbers
yeah,
and
anything.
Remember, Diane can sell anything, so you,
Yeah, well, and, yeah,
you
it has
grow it.
worked out. The growing part, yeah, is a little bit difficult. And
So what have you grown over the years? What did you grow for a while? I know you used to grow a lot more Macintosh than you do now.
Yep.
But what other things have changed when you started your farm stand? Take us through the 90s of what you were growing. When you first started open as
Okay.
a farm stand.
Of course, when we first started opening, we still had all those Macintosh
Yeah.
trees.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that we decided to try was organic growing.
Oh.
And so we isolated a section of the orchard, did the buffer,
Mhm.
and went through all the stuff to go through the
To
transition.
get certified.
Well, you have to go through 3 years of transition. At that point, you could sell them, you still get inspected and all that.
you could
and-
call them organically grown, you just
Yeah.
couldn't be
Yes.
certified.
We
Yeah.
weren't certified. And then we started to think, okay, we've got to come up with some other varieties quick here. So we started grafting trees to other varieties to quickly sort of get some other varieties so people could come and have a choice. The organic thing just never worked out economically. And I remember the fruit specialist telling me right up front, you can't grow apples organic in New England. You can't grow apples organically in New England. Well, you can, but you just can't do it and make any money.
well, especially in the early days, before organic became more of a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely more adopted now than it was
Yeah.
20 years ago.
And,
So,
but yeah, if you look at where all the organic fruit apples anyhow are coming from, they're coming from California,
yeah.
in the middle of an irrigated desert.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Nothing lives out there,
Right.
you know. So yeah, from a disease pest, all of that,
That's right. They don't have it.
they don't have it. They don't have it.
We're surrounded with trees and rain.
Yeah,
and-
we're this nifty, we love it, you know, this little island of agriculture in a sea of trees.
Yeah.
Which is habitat for all sorts of
For
stuff.
everything.
So that didn't work. We started irrigating, then we started a process of that we're continuing to this day. Pretty much an acre comes out of every year, gets cut down, and gets replanted
With new apples.
with new
types.
apples. And, you know, you've
So this is the approach, instead of you have a 20-year-old Macintosh trunk, you wouldn't graft onto that and grow a different tree, or?
We did that originally, we started
Okay.
grafting, and it works, grafting works, it's a skill, it's another thing you have to learn to do well, and if you screw up, you set yourself back even further. And some of the newer varieties were actually patented, so you legally couldn't do that. So you had to buy the trees from a nursery and pay it. I get it.
Sure.
And-
Sure, they did the R&D,
Exactly.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so you buy, in the vineyard world, there's a lot of discussion between the rootstock and the cultivar that you have.
Yep.
And I assume it's the same thing
It's
in
the
the
same in
apple world,
apples,
so
yep.
that you have certain rootstocks that are ideal for a
Sure.
setting like yours at Apple Hill. And so you buy N22R or something, and you put your Roxbury russet on that, or whatever it is. The same thing happens in the grape world,
Yep.
and there are various rootstocks that are ideal for certain things, and then you get whatever cultivar you want.
Yeah, and you're right, it's the same, and
Okay.
now we have a huge selection of rootstocks, dealing with soil type, dealing with the size of the tree,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out some varieties do better on certain rootstocks, and now we've got a whole series out of Cornell. Because one of the things we found was, in orchards, especially after they've been in the ground for 20, 30 or more years, they develop a certain biome in the soil, certain
Sure.
mycorrhiza and all this other stuff
Yep.
that's in there.
They're terroir.
Yeah, they're terroir,
They're
exactly.
terroir, yeah.
And so, you know, you go in with a tractor and you rip the trunk out of the ground and you drive a plow over it and you lime or fertilize like you're supposed to, you stick a new tree in the ground. And
New terroir.
there were problems.
There are problems, yeah.
And it was actually labeled as apple replant disease.
Oh, wow.
And so
Wow.
Cornell did a bunch of work on it and figured out a few things that they could do, and turns out there were certain rootstocks that do well in an apple replant situation. So yeah, now we have choices of hundreds of different choices.
So I'm going to pause again, because we will run out of time
Oh, yeah.
quicker than you think, and there's a
I know.
bottle over there that's not open.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to miss it, so while you're opening that, I guess the next question I had for you is, so I assume at this transitionary period, the number of
I can
days
get
you...
another glass, don't
It's okay.
force your
I can do
drinking.
it. I was saying that, but.
So the number of days that you got to go skiing every year maybe went down a little
Yeah,
during
we had a
this.
few years in there where
So
it dropped, yeah. Yeah,
when
we
you-
didn't quite hit our goal.
Yeah, so when you,
Uh.
when was it, or was there a time now after you made this transition that the number of days of skiing actually started to go back up again? And what was it that you, what do you attribute your biggest success at this point, right? Your heyday at that point?
The biggest success was getting control of our market, so
Yep.
that we were in control.
Yep.
And the cool thing about being in touch with your customers all the time is they tell you what they don't like and what they do like.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
make adjustments. And growing vegetables is a little bit easier in that if that tomato variety doesn't work, or people don't like purple peppers.
We plan a different
Do
one
another one
next
next
year.
year.
You do plant it. The apple thing is a little bit more complex, and
Yeah,
your
it's like
mistakes
the-
can
it's
be.
like the wine side, you know, you need to have, it's a longer time frame
Yeah.
than the
Um,
short ones.
But yeah, once we sort of got a hold of our markets a little bit better, figured out what we could do good, and sell, the business leveled out, and
what year was
it
that?
became a whole lot better.
What year was that?
Go.
You, what do you think about that?
I probably 2000 something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, about that.
Early 2000?
yeah.
And just curious, the mix at that point, what percentage was wholesale, what percentage was Apple, you pick
It
kind of?
changed really
product?
fast.
Yeah,
It really did, I have to say.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
flipped.
the broker wholesale thing ended fairly quickly.
Yep.
But we have continued to wholesale apples
A
to,
little bit.
People like us.
to people like you, to other farm stands.
Yep.
And other orchards that have different crops, or we have varieties that they don't have. And that's been the continuing thing between the orchards. And not to jump too far ahead, but of
Yeah.
course, 2023,
Right.
you know.
We're not talking about it.
Yeah, we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
But one of the really amazing things for us about 2023 was it did not take many calls at all. And we had commitments on apples to sell to us.
To sell to your
And
farm.
we had growers calling us, and
Yeah.
we and other growers were buying apples. We did it with Joe, buy apples together, and you take this many bins, I'll take this
Yeah,
many
yeah.
bins, and somebody would call and say, have you got any corns? Yeah, I got some, I just bought some. And it was a really nice sort of grower community that did that.
What a great community.
Yeah,
How
that,
far afield does that go? How,
New England,
so it's
New England.
just New England wide?
yeah,
Well, we
pretty
would have
much.
gone to New York if we'd had to.
Yep, we have friends in New York, and I had made one of those calls, and
So
they-
if all of your Cortlands get wiped out, you could get Cortlands from someone else?
So I know you don't want to talk about this, but we have to say, I mean, we've been talking about this for the last 6 months, and we were at a very critical point on May 17th at a grower that grows kiwi berries for us down in Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
And we were with him on May 17th when he was seeing this. It was a beautiful sunny day. It
Yeah.
was absolutely glorious, and was telling us the end is tomorrow. And sure enough, that May 18th
Hard
was
frost.
the hard frost that hit New England and wiped out fruit across New England, not just apples, but I guess probably apples were
Stone
the
fruit got
biggest.
hit really hard.
Stone fruit
Pears
got
got
hurt in
hurt.
February.
And they
Yeah,
got
no,
hurt. Oh,
yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, we, you know, the warmest winter we ever had,
Yep.
2023, we lost our peaches
Terrible
one
skiing.
night. Yeah,
Local skiing was
yeah,
terrible.
we lost our peaches on one night, February 3rd, I think it was. One night, 18 below. Remember, that was the night, it was 90-something below on top of Mount Washington.
Yeah.
And we got up the next morning, I was like, okay, well, that's done.
That's-
And we had cut buds the week before that went to Maine, and every bud was 100%,
viable.
6 days
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, it's part of our research project we've
You
been
know?
working on.
So you go out to a tree, you take these off, that you send the
It was a-
buds over, or you just take a razor blade out and cut them in half
No,
and look at them?
you
or-
can do that,
Yeah,
but what the project is, we've got an acre of peaches. There's 35 different varieties, 3 trees of each variety. And
And it's a research project.
it's a
It's a-
research
yeah, it
project
sounds
with
like it, yeah.
UNH, UMaine, and then a grower group in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And we were looking at both the varieties and also to see, and to be honest, we thought our looking forward optimistically, peaches have what we call a low chilling requirement, meaning that you harvest, then they go into dormancy, and then after a certain number of hours below 40 degrees, they come out of dormancy and go into rest. And they're just sitting there waiting for spring. And so we always thought, okay, this whole climate thing, this is gonna be our problem. Peaches are gonna meet their dormancy in January, and if, third week of February, we're gonna have that 60-degree week, that all the maple guys get excited about and all that.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a cold night, that'll be the end of the peaches. And 2023 sort of proved us wrong in that we hit 14 below on the third.
So to go back to your question,
Yeah.
yes, they cut little sticks of wood, okay, those little pencil things.
Okay.
And over in Maine, they have freezers that they can put them in, so they can bring them down to 5 below, they can bring them to 10 below, they can bring them to 15
See
below.
where they die off.
And then
so
pull
we
it
were,
off, yeah.
we were looking for varieties, and that was a quick, easy way to do it. She's got these
Okay.
programmable freezers.
Yeah.
You can put them in to see what the absolute temperature was, and then do different regimes on them. And we were also looking at, one of the things we get, lately we've been getting bombarded with, is that companies want to sell us nutrient packages to spray on the trees.
Oh, boy.
Bigger,
Oh,
better,
boy.
faster,
Oh, yeah.
you gotta,
Oh, yeah.
how much of it is snake oil, and maybe there's something there. So we were thinking that'd be another project for that particular project is there something we can spray in those buds to make them bigger, healthier, fatter, faster, whatever?
Okay, we're not talking about 2023.
Yeah, so we're not talking
Yeah, we're
about
not-
Tell me
2023.
about this new one.
Yeah, what about the new wine?
kinda
There you go.
fizzy.
So,
Good change of
so it
subject,
doesn't even have
Diane.
a label on it. How about that?
I noticed that.
So this is a batch of our sparkling Winnipesaukee Rosé,
Which is one of my favorite
which
ones.
is a wine that's based primarily out of your fields.
Yep.
So this is a sweet cider base, and to that we add a couple bins of Kingston Black that you grow. You chop those up and throw that into the sweet cider, and then we add some cranberries from Cape Cod, and those all co-ferment. This particular batch, which will be released in a month or two, so this is before this is being released, this particular batch, a portion of it went to Flag Hill, which I know you also sell
Yeah,
apple juice to for their apple brandy that they make, and maybe some other things as well. They have a specialized high-pressure tank, and they can take any sort of still product and pump CO2 into it to a very high pressure. Like when I pulled the cork, you heard the pop.
Yeah.
So this is a full champagne pressured
Nice.
Winnipesaukee Rosé.
Nice.
Would it be safe to guess that maybe there are some original Macs in here from the early trees?
I don't know which batch of cider you
This is
used.
21.
It depends on which batch, we
Yeah.
pressed for you.
But
Yeah.
you do have some original Macs that you
Yeah,
would
there's
be
still
in the
some-
sweet
some
cider
there,
line.
yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, that's one of the things we gotta decide pretty quick is the fate of those trees. Because, we're getting to the point where we could argue that we've got all the apples we can sell right at the door. But we've got to allow for crop variations, so you end up growing more than some years you need.
and yeah.
And plenty
how you
of
deal it.
flavors.
And so, we've been working our way down the hill on all those Macs that were planted in 1979.
Wow.
So, there's some Mac trees there that are 40 years old, 40-plus years old.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, do trees in the grape wine world, vines will start producing 4, 5, 6 years out, but the fruit that they produce is mediocre for wines. Give them another 10 years, their roots are better developed, their biome is better developed, and the concentration of flavor in the fruit is much better, and you end up producing a higher quality wine. Wait another couple more decades into 40 or 50 years in the ground, and those vines will have a lower yield of very high quality fruit. So you have to make up for that lower yield by charging more money to stay even. Eventually you get to a point where you're pulling out vines and replanting and starting that process, depending on what price point your product's gonna be. And I don't know if in apples it's that same way, that they're productive from 10 to 20 or 10 to 30, and then they taper off on either side. How does it work with apples?
This has been one of the things that Steve and I have pushed, and the cider apple trees we got, They're on, the rootstock is called Malling 111.
Okay.
And it's a fairly large tree, doesn't come into production terribly easy, or terribly quickly. But we felt that trees that size produced better quality fruit. And we've done the sort of the same thing in our planting for our Pick Your Own. One of the early surveys we did was customers didn't like the trees on the trellises. Because if you're in this row and you want to get over that row, you gotta go all the way to the other end. People want to wander around.
They wanna wander.
Well, again, just listen to your customers' thing. So we've been planting what we call pretty much semi-dwarf trees
Okay.
that are semi-freestanding. People can wander around.
Yep.
We think they produce better fruit.
And the dwarf, as opposed to the standard, come producing better fruit more rapidly, right?
That's the economic thing, which I
That's
totally
the
get.
Yeah.
You know, there's a huge upfront investment when you're planting, 1,000, 1,200 trees per acre. But the roots on them are not strong enough to hold that tree up, so you gotta put a support system
And
in,
you've been to Joe's.
trellis,
Oh, yeah.
wire.
Oh, very familiar.
And then once you've got that investment, you're like, I can really gotta get these things in. So then the next thing you got is irrigation. Then you get the irrigation and you got the people selling you fertilizer saying, I can make that tree go 4 feet this year. And it's
And then you've got to get the equipment that fits down those rows.
Yep,
because your
to go
big
down it
tractors
and
aren't
spray
gonna
it
fit
right and
anymore.
harvest it
and
right.
then you produce apples that are this big.
Yeah, and 2-pound apples,
Yeah.
2-pound honey.
interesting, cool, all that, but,
And Johnny takes one bite, throws it down, I'm done.
Well,
And-
that's the craziest
Oh,
thing,
God,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that must drive you nuts. I mean, I remember taking my own kids over to Surwick's farm, right here in Samberton. And Katie and others have worked hard to grow that orchard for a long time, and we would walk through, and sure enough, the kids would pick an apple and bite it, and then drop it and grab a different one that looks good, because you're surrounded by all of these apples, and it's like,
So, back to this.
yeah.
It's going to be released in time for Valentine's Day? See,
We-
I'm the marketer here that
we
always
can-
thinks about this.
We can make that happen. I have I'm waiting on a sticker,
The labels. Is
label?
that in production?
and that's in production right now, and I should have it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And what's it going to be called?
Winnipesaukee Rosé. So it's the exact same label, our sparkling
okay.
Winnipesaukee Rosé,
Okay.
but it has a special sticker on the back, and it's got the full black, it's a champagne cork with
Yeah.
wire,
Mhm.
and so it's the same wine that we've had before, but instead of the screw cap at low bubble volumes,
this is,
this is cranked up, so you get that nice
You get
tapestry
that.
of little bubbles.
Yep.
And you
Perfect for
get the champagne.
Valentine's Day. With
Yeah,
strawberries and
no,
chocolate, you
I
know,
agree.
We will be
like
we
that.
will be
We will
pouring
be
it here
pouring it
for
here.
our Valentine's event. We always have a
So we're
Valentine's
motivated
Day.
to get it released by then
There
too.
you
there
Trust
you
me.
go, okay,
Yes,
good,
yes,
good.
It's in order. It's in production, and it's.
It is
it's gonna happen.
it's the same product, but we didn't have the capabilities to produce more than 1.5 bars
Yeah.
pressure. So this gave us the opportunity to put it into the level of a champagne, 5 bars.
5 bars. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Have you been down to Brian's,
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
new building?
Oh, I haven't
No,
seen the new building.
I haven't
No.
seen the new building.
Yeah, it's under construction right
Okay.
now, yeah,
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Cool.
yeah, he's going right after it.
He's gone gangbusters. It's been great to see
He's a
Brian.
smart
Oh,
young
he's,
guy.
Take over
he's
that
a very
place.
smart young guy.
Yeah.
He's
That-
got
that's
and
the
he's
secret,
got
the
his.
young guy.
Yeah, exactly.
So we only have 5 minutes left, and we've been through the sort of the story, which is what I really wanted to hear, and it's been a pleasure. I'd be interested to know if, unless there's something you've left out that you think we should know, I'd be interested to know where do we go from here?
Well, that's I was
know
I
we've
wanted
talked
to
about
do that too.
yeah.
What's the future?
Well, that's a really good question,
And you-
and,
One we've been pondering.
one that we've been pondering is you gain in age. Our goal is to keep farming as long as we can, physically, and that the farm will go to another farmer somehow. And that's not an easy task on either side of that.
I know. I can
And
imagine.
it's actually one of our projects this winter is to get a little more information on how to structure a farm business for sale. And do it so that it's for sale, that somebody can afford to buy it and farm.
Hmm.
You might want to share your story you came home with today
Which one?
from Durham, from
Okay.
the secretary.
Yeah, so this morning, I got invited down, Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, was there to do he called it a town meeting, to outline all the programs that USDA had. And one of the questions came by on transitioning farms, that if you look at, there's a whole bunch of farmers my generation,
Mm-hmm.
this is gonna change, what's gonna happen? And he relayed that he happens to own a farm in Iowa, I believe it was. And he says his two sons aren't really interested in it, he leases it out to another farmer's operating it. And he says, of course, the value has appreciated since he's owned it like 30 years. And he says, if I sell that right now, he says, I will incur this huge capital gains tax. And he says, so the incentive for me is to not do that. Why would I do that? He said, I can, pass it on to my wife if I go first. He said, and then my kids will ultimately end up with it, and there's a step-down process there. But he said, wouldn't it be great if we could come up with a tax scheme that would eliminate or reduce that capital gains thing for farms that went to another farmer? And obviously there'd have to be some agreements there and all that. And it's a good point, because that is one of the things that we have found out is, that is significant. Especially for someone like us, we don't have any children, so it's gonna get sold at some point. And buying a piece of land that seemed frightfully expensive in 1978 is scary what it's worth right now.
Yeah.
And so how do you recoup that or
Right.
not?
And,
There's a-
and
there's
your interest is to try and ensure that the future remains farming for that property.
That's what we'd like, and
Yeah.
we were working on that.
Right. Right.
Is to see another young couple like us, or similar
Yeah.
to us, and give them the same opportunity to
Right.
sink or swim, but it's a great life.
Yeah.
It's not the best living if you look at what people can earn these days.
Well,
But there's other things to
quality of
measure.
life is not based
There's-
on dollars.
That's right. There's other ways to measure. We don't regret.
How many
bit of
days
it.
skiing?
One more day a year skiing.
We gotta get back into that, and that's part of the aging process
Oh,
here.
believe me,
Okay.
I feel it too.
Um,
There was a fascinating book I read a couple years back called Taste Memory, and this is in Maine, and it brought up this program in Maine along these lines where people were noticing outside Portland and elsewhere that all of the beautiful farmland was being turned into McMansions, because that's the only way that people were recouping the money from their property. Yet Portland has grown as sort of a gastronomic hub, and people are very keen on locally grown fruit and locally produced beverages, and so they didn't want to lose that whole local thing. And there was a group that came together and developed a nonprofit that grabbed money from people who wanted to support this. And the idea would be that you're going to sell a farm that's worth $2 million to a young couple that can't certainly afford $2 million. So this nonprofit would give you the 1.5, and these kids would be up for the 500 grand, or whatever the numbers were, so that you got what you deserved, the value of your efforts, and that farm could live forward because these kids didn't have the huge financial burden to get into that. And it was a cool concept,
Yeah.
and I forget what it's called, but it's alive and
There's-
it's working, and I know there are variants
There
of
are
that
similar
all over
things
the place.
around, and that's part of our exploring here, is
Yeah.
to sort of figure out that. I suspect that the secretary's talk would have been different if he was in Iowa, and he was leaving New Hampshire and going to Maine, but the gist of his talk was that small farms are the future, and we found that out in the COVID thing.
Yeah.
That our whole supply chain and all that fell apart, except
It's
for
a
the farms
no-brainer
had
for
stuff.
anybody that just steps back and looks
Yeah.
where the world has gone in the last
Yeah.
50 years. And so many of people that think clearly, in my opinion, go, shit, we should be small distributed.
Yeah.
That is just the way nature works. It's small distributed format, and that survives. All these big mega format distributed things is so fragile that one thing comes in
It messes it up.
and it just messes it all up.
Yeah.
With the exception of the problem of how do we serve cities of 12, 14, 15 million people?
Well, that is that is
That's a modern
but that's
problem as
that's
well.
the change. We've always congregated into these urban centers,
Right.
and now
Not always.
not always, but now in our current
Yeah.
realm, that's starting to break out, and COVID brought that out too. People are like, oh, I don't have to live in downtown Boston to do my insurance job.
Come to Meredith.
I can come to Meredith.
They did.
So I'm gonna buy this place in Meredith. Oh, boy, so all the property values go up, and now
Yeah.
that's a real
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
then, perfect example, our neighborhood, we have all these beautiful new houses. And all of a sudden, my house that I've done nothing to in the last 20 years, all of a sudden has to meet their standards in assessment. So my appraisal went
Yeah.
up because
Yeah,
all
or-
these
oh, yeah.
houses are
Yeah,
selling
or
for,
like-
and it's like, wait a minute, I have done nothing to this house. This isn't fair. That's why current use is important, you know?
Oh, yes.
It's like,
Oh,
it does
I know.
work,
Yeah.
you know? People don't realize
Yeah.
it, but, yeah.
Yeah, so the Secretary's talk revolved around a lot of programs that USDA is working on to assist small farmers.
That's
in
great. I
both
mean, it's-
marketing and going. He's got an uphill battle, because, of course, big ag
of course.
pushes USDA to do this, and USDA covers a lot of stuff, including fixing your sewer plant in town
Yep,
to
yep.
nutrition stuff. It's a
Yep.
big agency. And so he gets pulled in a lot of different directions. And like I said, his talk might have been different in Iowa, but it was interesting to hear what he had to say. It was good to hear what he had to say. We'll see.
Well,
If that can be part of the solution or not, government, you know.
on that note, we have come to the end of an hour. Yet again, time has flown by. I could see.
We just start to scratch the surface.
I know.
On some of these things, especially when you talk about really an institution, decades and decades of work and challenges and major pivots. I mean, you guys have been through a lot in
We had
in
help.
your
We
lifetime.
had plenty of help with plenty of peers and other growers.
It
and-
sounds like a
And
great
our
community.
university and our extension personnel
Yeah.
and all that.
I'm
Yeah.
actually on the board of UNH Extension, on the advisory board for the local UNH
Are you?
Extension
Good.
office.
Yeah, we both have
just started
served our
that.
term there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, extension is good.
Yeah,
Good news.
it's great people. Yeah, doing
Yeah.
good things.
Good for you.
Yeah, I hope I can contribute. So,
Yeah, I'm sure you can.
well, thank you guys for coming up here. It's been a pleasure. I wish we could continue to learn more and share more of your story. It's been fascinating, and we really appreciate it. And more than that, we appreciate the fantastic fruit that we've been getting from you for all these years. And I hope
Oh,
it
yeah, they
continues.
worked out. I mean, they came early before the show to pick up an empty tote
Yeah.
because he's going to fill it with cider and bring it back over tomorrow because we're making a batch of cider. So it
That's good.
keeps going on all
We
the
thank
time.
you, too.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yes, we appreciate the business, and that's been one of our goals, is to align ourselves, make relationships with local people.
It's been great. I remember talking to Steve Wood about his time and transitioning and his focus on dry cider and all this stuff. He said, "Well, I don't have a Diane, so why didn't do a shop?" That's his words. That's what he said.
She's amazing. She's amazing.
Well, on that note, thank you everybody once again for joining us for another Monday evening. We will
Thank you.
see you next Monday, same time at 5:30. And until then, have a great week. Cheers.